I just wanted to tack on this addendum to the previous video and talk about something that may not be readily apparent but will become increasingly important as you use classes and create classes. And that is this, that when you define a data type, when you define a class, and you define properties on that class, up to now, the properties have all been simple properties, simple types like strings and integers and bools and things of that nature. However, you can also create properties that are of complex data types that reference a complex data type that you create, a custom class that you create. It can also be a property that holds an array of simple types or an array of objects. It can be also a collection of objects, which you haven't heard about. You'll see them hinted at here, and we'll talk at length about collections a little bit later on. So again, I want to emphasize that you will often create classes or utilize classes in the .NET Framework Class Library that have defined as properties complex types. Okay, so just to kind of illustrate this, I have this project called cs-asp underscore 042-supplement, and you can see that this again is just a very simple web forms project with an OK button and a result label. What's more interesting is the composition of the classes themselves. So you can see that we have a student class and a course class. And in addition to that, an enrollment class, a room class, and a schedule class. So let's walk through, for starters, the course class. A course could have an ID and a title, but then it can also have a reference to an instance of the room class. And the room class may just be the room number in the building that is available at a given time of day for a class to be scheduled into. So this course references an instance of the room class, which represents the building and the building number where this class will be held. Furthermore, if we skip down to line number 14, you can see that we have a schedule, which is an array of a class named schedule. And a schedule is simply just the day of the week, the time that the class will start, and how long the class will go, the duration in minutes. All right, so just to emphasize this, we would have, perhaps if the class met 3 days a week, there would be an array of schedule objects that would each hold like a Monday class, a Wednesday class, and a Friday class, for example, at a given time of day. And then also, again, I know this doesn't look familiar to you, but we'll talk about collections a little bit later on. You can also create a property that holds as a reference a collection of a given type. So in this case, we would have a collection of students. A collection is similar to an array. We would hold on references to multiple students that are enrolled in this given course. Okay. Moving on to the student class, which is the other major class here, you can see that the student also has simple properties like the ID and the name, but then it also has a collection of enrollment objects in the properties called enrollments. And again, it'll just contain an array or a collection of individual enrollment objects. And enrollments are simply the given course that the student is enrolled in and what their GPA or their grade point average is for that given course that they took. And you can see that this also references a course object, an instance of the course class. So that when we go and take a look at the default.aspx.cs, you can see how all this comes together. First of all, we're going to create, and we're just hard coding this. Obviously, in a real application, we'd pull data from a database or allow a user to type in data into some form. But again, we're just going to hard code to show how to create instances of classes and then set their reference to a property. So in this case, we're going to create a new instance of student, and we're going to grab the result of the setup student helper method. So here we create a new instance of the student class and then begin to populate some of its simple properties like the ID and the name, and we'll return an instance of student, and we will set that student object variable to that reference that's returned. And the same thing will be true with the course. Now, in this particular case, the student has a property called enrollments. You'll recall that was a collection of enrollment objects. And what we'll do is call the add method of that collection to add another enrollment. So this is, I'm enrolling in another class, I'm enrolling in a second class, I'm enrolling in a third class. That'll give me 9 credit hours for this particular semester. And so to do this, what we're going to do is take a reference to the course and pass that to this little helper method called setUpEnrollment. And so we create a new instance of enrollment. We set the course equal to the course property of the enrollment equal to the course reference that was passed in as an input parameter to this helper method. So again, we're just passing around references to memory. As we create a course object in memory and we have its reference, and now we say, oh, we want a student to enroll in that course. Okay, we give it to this helper method, and now that helper method right here creates creating a reference to that course that's already in memory. And so now we've kind of associated those two objects together, an enrollment instance with a course instance. And to kind of see this working, you can see that we basically just are printing out all the students and all their enrollments, or one student and all of his enrollments, and then furthermore, we move on to the given course that we've set up, and we loop through to display all of the students that are in the course and all of the times which that course will meet, which room they'll meet in, and what time of day and what day of week that they'll meet. And so just kind of to show here that we have a problem with our code, and I want to emphasize the fact that an object variable only holds a reference to an object that's already in memory, even if it's a property. So in this particular case, you'll see that we're trying to pass in an instance of the course object to this enrollments property. But the problem is that you can see that this enrollments property is set to null. What we didn't do is create a new instance of that list of enrollment here in our setup student helper method. So we really needed to do this. So student.enrollments equals new list of enrollment, and now we have a new instance of a list of enrollment in memory, and we can begin to add items to it using the add method right here. So now it'll run this particular time. So just be aware that before you can use a given property and utilize its properties and methods, you have to create a new instance of that particular type, or give it a reference to a type that's already been created in memory. All right, and so you can see the output there. So again, just the big takeaway from this is that your classes can have properties, and those property types can be simple or they can be complex. They can be the types that are already defined in the .NET Framework class library. Like date time is a complex type, and even maybe something from the system.io or system.net namespaces. Or they can be instances of your custom class that you build, like we did in this particular case. Okay? So hopefully that is helpful. Just hold that in the back of your mind. As our examples get more complex, you'll see this technique used more often. Okay? Thank you.